just...
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending the first day of the two-day training agenda for the 2016-17 Qualified Allocation Plan. As most of you know, this is Ohio's first two-year allocation plan. And in addition to some of the policy changes we've made concerning our competitive scoring criteria, we have also enhanced and expanded our green standard requirements this year. So today, with the OHFA staff, who are represented by myself, Kellen Craig, Karen Banyai, I think I saw Daryl Davis somewhere in the room. Our architect, Mark Schlutz, is here. And there may be several other staff that I can't see in the room, so please raise your hand if you're sitting somewhere. We have Kathy Hottinger and Samantha Mikowski in the back there. But joining us today for this half-day training are representatives from the Enterprise Green Communities criteria and the National Green Building Standard. Affordable housing developments funded by OHFA, as you know, will be required to achieve green building certification under the 2016 and 17 allocation plan. And we'll begin our agenda today with a presentation from Enterprise Green Communities, who updated their standard in April of this year. And this is an ambitious yet achievable green guideline for affordable housing developments. So we're pleased to have Elizabeth Richards here today, as well as Ray Dimmers, both with Enterprise. The latter half of our agenda will focus on the National Green Building Standard, which is the newest pathway for green certification supported in our allocation plan. And the NGBS establishes practices for the design and construction of green residential buildings, renovations, and land developments. So we're pleased that we can have Cindy Wasser and Chris Schwarzkopf here to provide you with the information you'll need to get your project certified should you choose to go this route. So without further delay, I'm going to turn it over to Ray, and he's going to talk with you about the 2015 Enterprise Green Community Standard.
Good morning. Thanks for having me here today. I just before I go ahead and get started, I just wanted to introduce Elizabeth Richards from our Ohio team here and ask Elizabeth to say a few words about the work we do in Ohio.
It's afternoon, Ray.
It is. Sorry. I flew in, so it's a little bit different.
I'm Elizabeth Richards with Enterprise office in Ohio. We're based in Cleveland, but we work statewide. And for those who aren't familiar with Enterprise, we work nationally. We have 10 market offices in places you would expect in the California cities, East Coast, Gulf Coast, et cetera. Ohio is a legacy office for Enterprise, and we work in two tranches. On the business side, we offer the full range of syndication and equity services, so 9%, 4%. We just closed our first RAD transaction earlier this year. We are one of the nation's largest CDFIs, and we have the full suite of lending programs and services for partners, everything from pre-development to acquisition to bridge lending. And then with our sister company, Bellwether Enterprise, we offer permanent financing, Fannie and Freddie services there as well. On the program side, we make grants to nonprofit partners to do the wonderful work they do in communities around the state. And then we have amazing initiatives like Green Communities, which is really our flagship program. And we're excited to share the update of the program with most of you today.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So before I go ahead and get started, I just wanted to see by a show of hands, how many people are familiar with Enterprise Green Communities and our criteria and certification? Okay, good. So most of you. That's helpful for me. So just a little bit about what we're going to go into today. So I'm going to share for about an hour and a half to an hour and 40 minutes, and then we'll have time for really in-depth Q&A. I'd prefer to keep it sort of informal, so if people have questions as we go, I'll try to answer them in time. If it's a more in-depth question, I might table it towards the end, and then if it really requires me to get back to you with some research, I might have to follow up with an email if that will work for everyone. So a little bit about myself. I'm Ray. I'm with the Enterprise Green National Team. I've been with Enterprise for about 6 years, working on our Green Communities program. And really, I'm an architect by training, and really like working on this program with partners nationally because I think it's a really great holistic way to think about greening affordable housing in a really pragmatic and sensible approach. So that's really the tact that we've taken over the duration of Green Communities' 10 years. Just a little overview here of what we'll be speaking about in about an hour and a half. I'll give you an introduction to the Enterprise Green Communities program. For some of you, this might be a refresher. For some of you, it may be the introduction you never received. And then I'll give you an overview of how the 2015 criteria was developed and talk to you about the national group of experts, many of those in Ohio, that we asked for assistance to make this a really pragmatic and useful standard nationally. Then I'm going to go into the meat of the 2015 criteria. I'm going to go through the 8 Green Communities criteria categories, which most of you are pretty familiar with. I don't have time in an hour and a half to get into the red letter of every single one of the criterion, but I will highlight things that have changed or significant things that have been maintained for people to try to allay any fears or highlight any potential questions that may come up. So we may touch on something that you've noticed, or we may skip past it. Feel free to reach out or ask me afterwards, and we can get into more detail if I missed anything. And then I'll go into how projects earn Green Community certification, and I guess show you behind the velvet curtain of how it works, or how we go through our process, and give you a better sense of what we're looking for when we're going through the certification process to expedite that for everyone. So that's just a brief overview of where we'll be. This is a photo of our founder, Jim Rouse, who is a pretty remarkable affordable housing developer in the Mid-Atlantic and the Washington, D.C. And Baltimore area. I think something that's really special about Mr. Rouse and his legacy with Enterprise, now over 30 years old, is that he really recognized the importance of a human-centered approach to development and design build. So he was not, he was a financier from background and training, and a developer from background and training, but he really understood that space matters and building matters, and people's decency and self-worth was really critical in the development of affordable housing. And so he was an early advocate and helped spearhead the low-income housing tax credit and some other significant legislation nationally for the affordable housing space. So I guess we still turn back to our founder a lot for inspiration, but also as sort of a guiding light as to why we're doing the work that we're all doing. And this is just a little diagram to show how Enterprise works. So we are a very large 500-person national company with headquarters in Columbia, Maryland, and then market offices like the one Elizabeth works in here in Ohio and New York and San Francisco and New Orleans, Los Angeles, Chicago. I've now missed a few. But the point is we work through local market offices to determine and develop place-based strategies and find out what works on the ground with a particular housing stock, with a particular development stock, with a particular community. And then we have national initiatives like our Green Communities Initiative or our design initiatives or our Rural and Native American initiatives, which work nationally trying to take the information that's being learned at the local level and then create tools or create programs or create funding mechanisms to actually incentivize that nationally. And then we try to spin that back and forth to influence each other a little bit more holistically. So we're something from the local market may be working really well. Green Communities might try to pick it up and then roll it out nationally and then see how it takes root in another place like San Francisco or the Pacific Northwest, for example. And Green Communities has been around for a little over 10 years now. So Enterprise is a little over 30 years old. The Green Communities Initiative has been around for 10 years. And we've had 4 iterations of the Green Communities criteria. This has been sort of our foundational statement from the very beginning. So we're focused on environmental quality, economic vitality, and social benefit of affordable housing. So green affordable housing. So the key, we see green as being a great way to make affordable housing that is both healthier and safer, but also reduces energy costs and puts more money back in the pocket of folks living in the affordable housing units that you're all building, designing, and developing. And Green Community Certification has been in place since about March of 2010. We're currently seeing Green Community certifications in 39 states and the District of Columbia. Ohio is one of the states that we've had the most impact and draw from, so we're really happy to be here with you today. So go Ohio. I'm from New Hampshire. It's one of the gray states on this map. It's incredibly depressing. It's great to be from New Hampshire, but it's depressing that we're one of the states that does not have a Green Community certification. So if you know anyone in New Hampshire, please reach out to them and put them in contact with me. I would appreciate it. My friends are architects there, but not in the affordable housing space. So about the 2015 Green Communities criteria. So we started the process early last year when we went through a really rigorous year-long process to develop the document that you see a checklist of in front of you today. So the first thing that we did before anything happened was we went back into all of the questions and technical interpretations that we've given over the past few years with the 2011 criteria and brought that into a red line version of the document. So we started with all the questions that we had received and all the interpretations that were there. We rolled that in. We did some evaluations on trends that are happening in the green building industry. We looked at other green building programs to see what they were focusing on. We picked up a few areas that we wanted to bring into sharper relief within our program. And then we started with our first round of local developer comment period. So we reached out to our market offices. They reached out to all of you to find out, hey, what are you all working on? What are you seeing? What could we be doing better? What should we get into the document before we get into the drafting period? Then we went through 3 technical working groups. We had a technical working group, a policy working group made up of many folks from Ohio specifically, or OHFA specifically, but also developers in Ohio, and then an advisory working group. So these were folks that had been with Green Communities for nearly the 10 years of our program and really had been there when it was founded and sort of had that North Star as to why we were doing what we were doing. So we worked with these 3 groups in tandem and in simpatico to sort of check and balance each other as we brought the draft into our final public comment period. And then we went through a weightings exercise. So we wrote this criteria without any points or mandatories or anything baked into it. And then we took projects that are using our program and actually ran it through the new program with mandatories and criterions and optional points brought in and sort of calibrated it that way. So we did use several projects of various scale from Ohio, so that's why we feel particularly good that it's scaled appropriately as a national program, knowing that Ohio has housing types that are really range in terms of size and density. And then there was design and publication and release. And so now we're in this yellow phase. We're in the trainings and rollouts and technical tool development that surrounds our 2015 criteria program. So just a little bit about the programmatic requirements. So many of you are familiar with the 2011 program. I'm sure some of you have already cracked open the 2015 version of the criteria. So if I do, hopefully this will be a good refresher. From a programmatic standpoint, it's going to look very familiar. We have a series of mandatory criterion that we have applicable to all projects. So there is some specificity if you're a new construction project or a substantial rehab project or a moderate rehab project. But we do have a series of mandatory requirements that we feel are critical and achievable for all affordable housing nationally to be performing at a certain level, certain water performance, certain energy performance, certain infiltration rates, and be situated in neighborhoods that have a certain level of density and richness of life and opportunity to them. And then we have a series of optional criterion. Many have remained the same. Some of the optional points have changed. We even added a few to create some new opportunities for projects to take advantage of a particularly unique neighborhood situation or if there's a solar opportunity to perchance do solar panels, or even prepare for solar panel installation. Or if you have if you're a group that's particularly concerned about the environment and resiliency issues and significant storm events, you could go and pursue a more robust resilient strategy and earn optional points that way. So a lot of new opportunities for you all to be considering optional points within the program. This is a very quick skim just to give you sort of a high-level overview of the 2015 criteria. So our 3 areas of focus are really on cost-effective performance, making sure that we have a really pragmatic approach to a high-performing building, practical, achievable, and applicable across the United States. So this is a national program, and we work with groups across the country. So the same requirements need to be applicable in Brooklyn as they are in New Hampshire, as they are in Anchorage, as they are in Columbus or Cincinnati or Cleveland. So we have a criteria that adapts and has slight nuances to that to fit those situations and those density and those development patterns. And then really a people-centered resident approach. So the Green Communities criteria is a green building program which we only certify affordable housing. And by doing that, we think that we've got a particularly resident-centered approach to how we've developed the criterion. That's sort of how we've that's our gig, I suppose. So that's why the criteria has been set up to focus on resident health and well-being in a particularly sensitive and intentional way. We also have these new trends within the 2011 criteria, which I'll speak about throughout the afternoon. Thank you, Elizabeth, for catching me in the morning before. So prioritizing people, doubling down on basics, so making sure best practice is emphasized and strengthened, and that's really the way in which we're going through this. So we're not expecting wind turbines and solar PV panels and geothermal systems in buildings to get to our standard. That's not the way we've set it up. We're thinking beyond the building, so neighborhood development to whatever extent we can, making sure that projects are placed and residents are placed in places where they can thrive and have jobs and opportunities in neighborhoods and connected to the communities in which they live. Rehab friendly, so we know that nearly half of the projects that do green community certification are rehabilitation of some size or scope. So making sure that our program has enough flexibility for projects that are rehabs of either substantial or moderate size to be able to use our program and certify to the criteria. Simple but leave room for stretch. This is our note that many groups that are pursuing certification with us also want to do Living Building Challenge, or they're interested in Passive House, or they want to do LEED. Or in GBS. And so we want to incentivize project teams to use those other programs and to try to clear up any confusion when we can. So we have optional points available for many of those programs. So if you're pursuing one of those programs, you can earn optional points within our criteria, and we'll work out specifics as those come up. Resiliency and health are 2 themes that you'll hear really emphasized a great deal today with our work in the Gulf Coast with Hurricane Katrina, and then Superstorm Sandy up in New York. We've learned a lot from these significant weather events, and if there's any opportunity to plan in advance or have your building be a little bit more ready and have your residents be a little bit more ready for some significant storm event, we'd really like that to be in place. And then health, of course. So this new housing as a vaccine or housing as a way to alleviate some of the health conditions that we're facing. If there's anything the built environment can do to improve resident health, I think we want to do that, especially if there's a really simple switch that can be made. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those ideas within the 2015 criteria. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So those who have been on our website have seen that we've refreshed it over the last few months. Just wanted to show you where some of the things are. So this is the Enterprise Green Communities website. We have 2 areas that are you sort of come in, and it's criteria and certification. This is where you land. We're at one of these national 2015 criteria launch events, so welcome. You've participated officially. And then we have the criteria and the certification portal there. The criteria is where you'll find the manual. So you all picked up a checklist from the back, or should have one. There's one in the back. And then there's a series of supplemental documents here that help you sort of fill out the information around the 2015 criteria. So there should be an introduction to the 2015 criteria up there that's also available on the website here. And there's a series of supplemental documents to help inform how you're going about the program. We're currently in the process of building out some more of these documents. We're building out some more tools. We have some comparison documents with other national green building programs, which will debut in the next few weeks. So if you're familiar with other programs, you'll be able to dig into that and compare apples to apples. And then we've got a series of new tools that circulate around the criteria and implementation, some things around operations and maintenance and resident engagement, as well as some pre-construction planning tools there as well. And then the certification page. So, you know, I'll take that sort of criteria hat off, put on the certification hat. We got to get this done. We got a timeline. We got a date. OHFA needs some documentation. How the heck do we get this done? You go to the certification page. This is where you get down to brass tacks, I suppose. So all of the information on eligibility and requirements of the program, supplemental document instructions, how to do this, what this all means, how to get it done, and then a series of tools and templates to get that information done. Many of these have been used in the past. Some of them are for new criterion that haven't been done yet, and some of them are recalibrations of tools that we had previously. So sort of a mixed bag here, but this is what you'll need to get your certification completed with us. So with that, I'll go into the 8 green communities criteria categories. And really, I think, you know, you're familiar with green communities. You're familiar with LEED and NGBS and some of these programs. You know, ours, like many of those, deals with, you know, energy usage and water usage and recycling and all of the sort of kit and caboodle that you think of with a green building program or certification system. I think the things that I like to talk about and I think are really critical to emphasize to you all here today, and if you've certified with us, you probably recognize this, there are 2 categories within our program that are particularly important. One is integrative design, so that's your pre-construction planning process. This is your process where the project is just in the early stages, you're just getting funding or you're going to go in for funding. Your team is starting to coalesce. You're starting to figure out who you're going to be working with through that project. But that's the time, really, when you need to be considering your green goals, figure out which green building program you're going to use or how you're going to go about doing this, and figure out who's going to be responsible to get you there. So, you know, we have a series of mandatory and optional criterion within that category which get people started. But, you know, just more broadly, it's really important that when you're doing any green building program, you're considering early on what your goals are for the project and who's going to be involved and who's going to be responsible to making sure those things get done. We have a statistic that we've referenced. 70% of design decisions are made in the first 10% of the project timeline. It seems true. There's a lot of decisions that get made early on, and it's really important to consider those early and have the people in the room to make those decisions before they get set in stone. Cost orders are extremely, or change orders are extremely costly, and if we can avoid them, we'd certainly like you to do that. And then the second component, which we feel is really critical to our program and to green building in general, is this operations and maintenance and resident engagement. So, you know, I probably shouldn't say this, but the greenest building in the world with the fanciest doodads and systems will fail the same way every other building fails if you don't know how to maintain it, and you don't know what the systems, how they work, or who to call when they fail, or what that light means, or what that beep means. The system is not going to work. So part of our program is to have a series of mandatory and optional criterion to make sure that buildings that are designed to meet our standard will actually perform the way they've been designed and intended to. So we've got a lot of really new information in the 2015 criteria about how to do this, and we think it's built out in a really pragmatic approach for everyone to be pursuing. And that's not just for maintenance staff, it's for residents as well. So they need to understand not just that they have a building or a unit, but understand like why it was designed, why sustainability was chosen for them, why them being placed in that home will positively influence their electric bills, their water bills, their health, and how that can actually positively impact their life. So it's really it's a larger framework than that. So we've been starting to think about it more like this hub and spiderweb kind of thing, where you can't really consider these things sequentially in categories 1 through 8, despite concede here that I will speak about them sequentially, categories 1 through 8 today. But really, to do sustainability right and to do it well, you need to think about these things constantly throughout the design process, and certain things get hotter at certain periods. But really, it is a framework to think through and to achieve sustainability goals. So just a quick note before we get into the 8 criteria categories. We do certify projects of all different types. So we're dealing with projects that are in dense urban locations. We're also dealing with projects that are in more suburban or rural locations as well. We deal with projects that are new construction, substantial rehab, and moderate rehab. So we're dealing with a myriad of construction types as well. And then we're dealing with projects that are single-family homes, but we can also handle certifications of projects that are large multifamily high-rise buildings, so in some of the denser cities like Cincinnati or Cleveland, or perhaps Columbus as well. So we certify a range of projects, and there's some specificity within the criteria depending upon the project type. So before I go ahead and get into the 8 criteria categories, everyone's been very patient with my introduction. Are there any questions that I can answer before I get into the 8 categories? Speak now? Okay. Great. So I'm going to go through some of the 8 criteria categories. Like I said, each category, I won't be speaking about all of the criterion. I've tried to pull out some that I think are particularly salient to you all. Particularly, we've seen questions on or challenges with in Ohio, or some things that we just get a lot of frequently asked questions on to make sure that we catch it for you. So I'll try to be clear if we've got an exhaustive list on the screen or just a partial list for you. So integrated design, this is our pre-construction category. This is that's 70% of design decisions are made in the first 10% of the design process category. And we really feel like it's important to engage a lot on this process and make sure that people know what's getting done. So we have all of our pre-construction planning criterion that we used to have, so charrettes and goal setting is all in our 1.1A and 1.1B. Designing for project performance, so if the project is pursuing a particularly high energy approach or a low energy approach, so net zero energy or something like that, you can earn optional points by starting that process and designing the project that way. So that's an optional criterion within our program. 2 areas I want to spend a little bit more time on are 1.2 and 1.3. So 1.2 A and B is a mandatory and an optional criterion called designing for resident health. So we work with the folks over at the Health Impact Project at Pew, and then the United States Green Building Council, and then some researchers at the University of Virginia to develop a mandatory and an optional way where project teams will be looking at what their resident population is and then figuring out ways that they're making design decisions to positively impact resident health. So the mandatory option for this is relatively straightforward. There's a series of potential health hazards. There's a series of green communities criterion which could affect that. You need to catch a little bit of research, do a little bit of data crunching, and then sort of link those two. It's a pretty straightforward approach. The optional criterion is for folks that want to pursue more of a health impact assessment process. Has anyone gone through a health impact assessment? So a health impact assessment is a systematic way to evaluate a policy or procedure to understand how resident health or human health would be impacted. So it could be a policy, it could be a building, it could be a road closure, it could be making a single way road a two-way road. It could be any number of things, but really trying to understand how resident health or human health is affected. So what we did is we tried to take that thinking and that sort of approach and then put it into an optional criterion here. So if you want to engage with, if you have a population that has a particular sensitivity, say it's a veterans housing population or a senior population, or folks with a disability of some type, and you know that there are particular health concerns, this may be a criterion that you could really seize and latch onto and actually change the way in which you're doing development. So you would engage a public health professional or a university, do some real substantial research and data gathering onto the residents and what their particular health and stress concerns are, and then actually develop a series of metrics that you would carry through into the operations process to understand how human health is affected by that process. So a huge number of optional points in our program. It's an optional credit, so every project won't go through it. But I think if you've got a project where there's a significant health concern for residents, you would want to take a pretty keen look at that criterion. 1.3a and 1.3b is a similar approach to resiliency planning. So, as I mentioned before, our market offices have taught us a lot about some of the resiliency concerns that are happening nationwide as the environment changes. And we really want to just make sure that buildings and residents are have a plan when and if something happens to them. So we have a little design for resilience criterion in which you need to consider how residents would be impacted by a potential hazard. Do a little bit of research on what the most likely significant storm events primarily would be in your area, and then figure out how you would address those with the resident population. We also have an emergency management manual, which is in our Category 8 as a way to communicate some of that information. So we're not asking people to get into a big legal situation with creating safe spaces and how to do that, but really just figure out, if something happens, where do people go and how do they communicate, and how do they keep both a paper trail and then a digital trail of that, so people know how to get in touch. I did see a question out back. The question was, are these assessments required to be done by a third party? No. The mandatory can definitely be done by the project team in-house, and in the full criteria manual, you'll find out we have a series of resources. We have a really clear delineated list of how to do it and what sort of information you would be considering. The optional criterion is, again, much like the optional health criterion, is worth a lot of optional points. So we do have some suggested professions that you could engage with that could help you do that, and some resources from NOAA and some other federal and state agencies that have good information. But that's a really good question. So again, I should have started with this, but I'll go back to it. So everyone has the checklist in front of them. If you're not familiar, and it's no shame if you're not, that comes out of this full criteria manual. I've got a handful of copies left up front, so at the end of the session, if you want to come up and grab one, we also have them available online. And if you would prefer a hard copy, we can get your address and we can send you one. But if I'm talking about really in depth and you look at your checklist and you're like, I don't see anything about that, it's because it's in here. And so I apologize for that. But to keep the checklist short and something you can put in your book bag, we had to sort of keep it kind of trim. So great question. So location and neighborhood fabric. So this is a really popular category within our program, especially in Ohio. We do have all of the different criterion listed here, and I'm going to go into detail into some of them. This is one where I think we heard a lot of good feedback from the state of Ohio and some folks in Ohio, so we've got a lot better. I wouldn't say that everything really changed, but we do have a lot better language in categories like sensitive site protection and connections to existing infrastructure and development. Our compact development has changed slightly, so we used to have 3 categories for urban, suburban, and then rural tribal. What we found is that the rural projects and the suburban projects were meeting roughly the same, the urban and the suburban projects were meeting largely the same densities nationally, so we merged those criteria together, and now we have a rural pathway and then an urban pathway. So the numbers have changed slightly, but I don't think there actually will be any problems for Ohio projects seeking those development criterion. So check that out in the full criteria manual. Proximity to services is really critical, of course. A new optional criterion, which I'll mention, is this improving connectivity to the community. So we've heard a lot of project teams are in areas where there are either car shares or bike shares, or they're trying to promote bike lanes in their communities. So in those areas in which you're seeing alternative modes of transit, we've got a new optional criterion that you can earn points within our program to sort of highlight that. And this is one of those areas where resident health is kind of a key component. You can actually improve resident health by promoting alternative modes of transportation. And then we have a new local economic development and community wealth creation. So this is really emphasizing projects or I guess states in some cases that emphasize local hiring, either as a preference or as a local hiring law. You can earn optional points if you're using local labor and building wealth within that community that the project is being built. So a couple themes, just to put some visuals to them so you understand sort of our thinking on it. So amenities, this is a picture of Detroit. Detroit, is oftentimes seen as the example of a pretty lousy situation or pretty tough situation. This was done by one of our Rose Architectural Fellows and just highlights the huge opportunity that's in a city like Detroit, which is often seen on the news. And so, doing some of this site mapping, some of this amenity mapping and amenity planning is a key part of our program when you're doing things like context maps and site plans. So this is why we're making it part of our process and one of the supplemental documents that we require. Understanding where things are, so the infrastructure around it, both utilities but also streets, the quality of the streets, the quality of the sidewalks, bike paths as well. So I mentioned our new optional criterion where if you're building adjacent to a bike path, you can earn optional points. You would want to emphasize that if you had a family population or an area where you knew that the 5 to 10 year plan for that street or neighborhood had things like bike paths involved. Local food and access to gardens. This criterion has been tweaked a little bit and actually made a little bit, I think, easier within our program. So we had a square footage that was a little tougher for projects to meet, so we actually reduced that within our 2015 criteria. So this is a criterion that's particularly popular in senior projects, but also in family projects as well. They want to have a sort of an outdoor space for people to use and an amenity for folks, and the garden is really one of those great opportunities. So access to gardens or farmers markets. And this is just a quick anecdote, I think, about some of our site planning and why we harp on this is so much for resident health. So this is Ajula Obang. She lived in Worthington, Minnesota, in a Green Communities project, or in an affordable housing building that was not yet Green Communities certified. Oops, we lost her there. And she has 5 kids. One of them has severe asthma. And once a month, she was taking she was taking all the children for her one child that had severe asthma across the border into Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So it's an hour and 15-minute drive once a month to go for some asthma treatments. I keep losing her. Well, anyways, the story goes that Green Communities ended up doing a renovation of that project, and we did sort of a really light touch. We did all the mandatory criterion within the program and did a few tweaks that would improve indoor air quality within the house. So some things about ventilation, some things with carpets, and those types of things to really improve the quality of the indoor air. And then checked in on her later. And it turns out that after a year, her child had only had one significant respiratory event and only had to go to the doctor quarterly. So this is obviously a great outcome for her child, who had to go to the doctor less frequently and had less medications. But we're seeing a series of co-benefits that happen with the improved housing. So, there's a lot of driving that's involved. There's a day off from work. There's 5 kids in the car. There's a food on the road, if there's a potential accident, if there's insurance, and all these sorts of things that go into car ownership and taking the day off from work. That are affected by the environment that you're living in. And so by making improvements to the built environment and improving the quality of housing, there were co-benefits that extended beyond just, the insulation and the carpets and the paints and the materials that are in the project. It actually, can change much more than that and has a series of co-benefits across someone's life. So I think this is why we're talking about amenity-rich areas. This is why we're talking about building in areas that have access to healthcare systems. But it's also why we talk about, improving the indoor air quality of buildings, making sure ventilation's right, and choosing better materials and the like. So just sort of an aside as to why we think through these issues pretty thoroughly. Site improvements. This category is going to look very familiar to you if you're familiar with our program. There has not been a significant effect to this criterion. We did work with some folks from the National Floodproofing Institute to change some of the way the criterion language is written, to tweak that a little bit. And we've also worked with some folks that had provided technical questions to us to calibrate the language. But I would say that if you're familiar with this criterion category, you will see very little substantive edits that make it particularly more challenging. For those of you who are not as familiar with the Green Communities criteria, this criteria category is largely focused on stormwater management and controlling water outside the building. So making sure that projects are sited properly, are sloped and graded properly, to make sure that silt fences and curb cuts and those sorts of things that deal with water on-site during and post-construction are in place to make sure that water doesn't get into the building and cause problems either structurally or to create mold or mildew issues. Water conservation. So, like I said, no green building program would be complete without a water presentation. So this is our still the definitive study on water use in the American house was done in 1999 by the American Water Works Association. So these numbers are high, I would say. It's 1999. This is before EPA water sense really took hold, or some of the water conservation measures that the low flow fixtures and features that people are using. But 69 gallons per person per day in 1999. So even if that's come down, which I think that we feel really good that it has, and some newer reports have come out that have said it's gone down, I think that number is still a great deal higher than it needs to be. So as technologies improve, we have ramped up our criterion around indoor water use, particularly. So low flow fixtures, toilets, faucets. You can use things like aerators if changing out faucets is a particular challenge, but really getting those fixtures as low flow as possible. And I think that the technology's actually improved a great deal. We're hearing much less problems with the fixtures generally. Of course, if you're doing toilets, you should be consulting map tests to make sure that the toilet flush is good for the type of people that are living there and for the resident needs there too. So it's sort of the dark underbelly of sustainability. So we'll get off of map testing, I promise. So, visuals for folks to understand what we're talking about: faucets, toilets, leaks, and leak prevention is a huge thing. That diagram shows a great deal from leaks, 10 gallons a day from leaks. So even if we've cut that down, that's still one of the biggest water users in a house. So leak prevention is a new optional criterion within our program. These are two graphs from a group in Ohio. I won't call them out, but this was a survey study that they did of some of their properties. Does anyone notice? So this is daily measured water consumption for 2 properties. The 2 properties are on the same site. They are identical properties. Does anyone have a sense of what's different between these 2? Or notice anything spectacularly different about them? Yeah. The one on the left has a high water use all the time. So what would you? So that, ultimately what he's saying is that because the water use is high all the time, that's atypical, right? The water use should be going down when people are sleeping, so it's not. So that's water's being used other times. Is there anything else that's particularly noteworthy? Okay, so these two projects are using way too much water. The first project, this one on the left, has some underground water leaks. These folks are spending $15,000 a year on water, which is preposterous. They're leaking about 2 million gallons a year just underground. So that it's not even getting into the house or the home. It's just leaking. And that's why, one of the reasons why the graph doesn't really taper off at night. The one on the right is using significantly less water, and you'll see it's got a bit more of a typical pattern for water usage. It tapers down around this midnight to 2 and 4 a.m. It's still spiking in points there in the nighttime, which means that there's probably some sort of leak, or the systems are recalibrating at night, which is a little atypical. But this project is still using much too much water. This project is using 100 to 200 gallons of water at night. They're using potentially 73,000 gallons of water per year. Just a preposterous use of water. And these projects, this is stuff that is leak-based. These are leaks. The one on the left has underground leaks. The one on the right has leaks within the project, within the building, which is causing problems. So if you're not someone who's really concerned with leaks or haven't really been concerned with leaks, I know that water rates in Ohio are a particular sore spot. I know that water is getting more expensive, and there's a particular issue in some cities specifically. So water conservation is not just something that is an environmental concern. This is a huge financial issue, especially as water rates go up. Water leaks are something that we really should be addressing when we're getting into these projects, either new construction or rehabs. So our water conservation criterion, water conserving fixtures, we have mandatory requirements. All projects need to use water conserving fixtures, water sense, or of certain levels there too. If you want to go for an advanced water conservation project, if you've got a particular resident population, which would be fine with a lower water rate. I know sometimes there's some issues. This would be the criterion. You can do specific fixtures, or you could do an overall water reduction calculation, similar to the approach that LEAD and other programs have taken. So we have an optional feature for you there. Leaks in water metering, a key component of understanding how these projects are performing and how you can proactively diagnose when there's water issues. Efficient plumbing and layout and design, that is a new criterion within our program. I'll say it's really most applicable to a single-family project, but it certainly could be done by a multifamily new construction project that really wanted to minimize the length of the pipe runs and make sure that the system was set up in a way where less water was being in the system itself and in the built environment. And then access to potable water during emergencies. So this is one of our resiliency criterion. It's optional, but if you're wanting to emphasize water use, having potable water in case of an emergency would be this resilient option within our program. Energy efficiency. Yep. Question in the back. Sure, yeah. So the question was about, in 4.1, there's a new component about this, the service static pressure not to exceed a certain PSI, and how you would go about that if you had a rehab project particularly. We do have in the full criteria manual, we have some information about pressure regulating valves downstream, which we would suggest, or we can, some other features that you could do to correct that, or how we would identify that. if this was one of those issues where you couldn't get that service static pressure down with a valve or something to that effect, we would need to evaluate that through the waiver process. But it is a new mandatory requirement within the program, something we would have to evaluate on a case-by-case. But yeah, I would say first bet is to check out the full criteria manual. We have a couple up here. We can get you one afterwards and get into a little bit more detail on that. Great. Any more questions on water? Great. So energy efficiency, this is not all of the criterion within this category. This is a quick 5.1 A through D. This is where the rubber meets the road for a lot of green community certification projects. So the different building performance standards, which honestly I don't think have changed super significantly since the 2011 criteria. Based on our research, it seemed like Energy Star for new homes was still the best approach for new construction, single family and low rise. For new construction, mid-rise and high-rise, we're requiring the Energy Star multifamily high-rise program, certification to that program. There is also some language within the full criteria manual about using the prescriptive or performance approach to Energy Star multifamily high-rise and then combining that with a T&V protocol that LEED has developed for that. So there's an alternate way to get through that, which is in the full criterion manual, which we've been using successfully. Substantial and moderate rehab projects, single family and low rise, still meeting the HERS 85. So that's a pre-construction model and a post-construction testing to ensure that the project is meeting that. We do still have, in Ohio, there's a lot of rehab projects, a lot of old masonry construction projects. So we have that exception to use the HERS 100 if certain systems are installed. That exception is still in place. It is in the full criteria manual. So that, which was previously on an FAQ and extended through a waiver process, is now baked into the 2015 criteria manual for you to check out. And then the substantial and moderate rehab projects are oh, great, I'll come to that in 1 second. And then the substantial and moderate rehab projects should be meeting ASHRAE 90.1 2010. So that one did switch a little bit. It was previously 2007. We didn't bring it up to ASHRAE 2013 yet, but 2010 is where we settled on that. Have a question in the front? If it's doing the Energy Star approach, everything needs to be Energy Star certified. Yeah, we need to see certificates for the units. For the ASHRAE, for the projects that are using the HERS score, we can use the sampling protocol. So there's the large sampling protocol, which is baked into the ResNet sampling protocol, I should say. So that's the 1 in 7, and then a series of units there too afterwards to meet that. For the right, but in the ResNet approach, you wouldn't need the right. You don't need to test every unit. You need to have the sample satisfy that. Yep. So in Category 5, we also have, so if you're using one of these other programs, if you're pursuing Passive House or you're pursuing Living Building Challenge, which would be a nearing net zero approach, you could earn optional points within our program for doing those programs. If you had the opportunity to do solar PV or some other system like that, you could earn other optional points within our program there as well. If you what are some other things? If you had electricity metering is baked into this criteria category as well. So a lot of things around energy usage, and performance of the building are baked into this criteria category. I think this is one actually where we see fewer questions in Ohio than other places, to be honest with you. So I guess you have really great raters. I guess you don't. This is what it boils down to. Category 6, materials. So, this is construction waste management. This is making sure that we're using materials efficiently during the construction process and not wasting them. It's also about choosing better materials to go into the project. So that's low and no VOC paints, primers, adhesives, and sealants. It's a lot easier to ventilate a building that doesn't have toxins in it baked into it. So we have criterion for that within our program. Environmentally preferable flooring. So that's the no carpets on ground floors or ground connected floors. We've seen that a lot in Ohio. That's still in the criteria. It's been in there since the 2008 version. It's still in the Green Communities criteria. If you choose to do no carpet throughout the project, you can earn optional points within our program, so a durable flooring material. And we've improved the language in those criterion, so if you've had some questions with it in the past, I think we've got better resources for you and better language to make that really clear for you. Also, we've been working with some folks at the Healthy Building Network and built out this asthmagen-free materials criterion. Are you all familiar with health product declarations? Hands? Anyone? No? Okay, a few hands. Great. Great. So what the health product declaration movement is getting to, and a lot of major architecture firms and other folks in the design and construction industry are getting into, is how do we try to figure out what the supply chain and stream of the products that we're speccing into these projects is? So the health product declaration is saying that we're going to use only products that we know what the supply chain is. So from extraction from the ground into the built environment, how does that, where is that stuff from? Where does it come from? How does it get into the product, and how is it used? So it's really intensive, and the movement has not built out a super substantial list of products yet. So we don't have a requirement for it there too, but we do have this asthmagen-free material. So if there's a way in which you can proactively plan out toxins that we know can influence and cause triggers within asthma, you can plan those out of the project and earn optional points. So if you're significant building components, so wall systems, floor systems, that you choose asthmagen-free materials, you can earn optional points. So another resident health feature in our program. Construction waste management, which I mentioned briefly earlier, we did add a new ways in which you can do the construction waste management calculations. So there's now 3 different approaches. You can do it by material type. You can do it by total consumption or total weight of construction, or by cost of construction. So there's a couple new methods to earn points there if you haven't had that opportunity yet. So that's a new one. And then recycling storage, this is a criterion where, this is really getting into the operations and maintenance of the building, but making sure that recycling for residents is as easy as trash. So I don't know if Ohio does single stream. I know that some areas may and some areas might not, but making sure that recycling bins are provided for residents, and then common spaces in common and multifamily buildings have access to that, so we can make it super simple and super easy for residents to recycle throughout their building. So that's also sort of your typical green building program thing. So that's materials. Healthy living environments. I'm going to go into detail into some of these just because they come up a little bit. I wanted to make sure you all had some framing for it. So radon is planned out of Green Communities projects. We have requirements around radon. Lead is planned out of Green Communities projects. There was legislation in 1978 around lead, but making sure that it's rehabbed or abated. I know this is a significant problem in Baltimore, where I live, still, and it shouldn't be, but it's in the news still. So making sure lead is not in homes and toxic to residents living there. And in this category, we're really talking about resident health and user health. So some of it is about building systems, and then some of it is about more architectural features. So having play spaces or amenities for residents and children and adults on site is a way in which you can earn optional points, making that place somewhere where people want to be, and eyes on the street, and safe and healthy, and all that sort of good stuff is part of our criterion. Making sure that you're designing places that people want to live, so neighborhood scaping and parks, just making sure that greenery is baked into some of this. And then making the building actually function and workable for the residents that are in it. So this is example of a actively designed staircase. It's actually in a project in Brooklyn. So there was an old church building, which is the brick building, and then they added an addition onto it and then turned it into a residence and meeting hall sort of situation. So kind of a hybrid building. But they really wanted to make sure that the staircase was something that people saw and used. So they really differentiated it from the building, from the existing church building, to work as a hinge between the two buildings. This is all sort of designer speak, and some of it's probably not critical, but I think the key is to make sure that you're understanding that the stair is being a critical component to how the building works. So as such, we've been working with the folks at the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. I apologize. These are somehow on a timer, and I'm not sure how they got on a timer, but I'm struggling through it, so bear with me if I keep clicking back. So these are examples of actively designed staircases, and we worked on them with the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, which developed the active design requirements for New York City, and it's now being rolled out nationally, and a lot of folks are adopting it. And if you're not familiar with active design, I think the key component is to make sure that the building is doing things to incentivize a better resident use and a better human use, to make sure that the building is actually contributing more to resident health than hurting resident health. So we have a mandatory criterion within our program around this. It's very simple and straightforward. It's about signage and communications and active design planning. And then we have an optional criterion, which is a bit more thorough and robust and would take a little bit more work. I think the key thing for folks who are not as familiar with it, the example that's always used is if you have a new construction project that's a high-rise or a taller building and you would have elevators, rather than putting the elevator bank right facing the door and then tucking the stair behind, you would swap that. So you would bring the stair towards the front and you would make it a little bit wider, a little bit grander, and make sure that there was natural light or a bright colored paint. And then you tuck the elevator behind as an example to incentivize people to use the stairs rather than taking the elevator. In our criteria manual, we've got a ton of great statistics that we've learned. Taking 2 flights of stairs a day burns enough calories to I think, do average annual weight. So the amount of calories you intake are expended by simply taking 2 staircases a day, and then the numbers go up from there. So I think if you're looking to actually improve resident health, really making staircases that are inviting and well lit and painted and potentially have music in them or art or something is a really great way to do it. And since all projects need stairs, it seems like a pretty straightforward way. It is a little bit easier to do this in a new construction project where you can plan a really grand entry stair, but it's something that is new to our program, and we think something that is the mandatory is achievable by projects of all types. And then, of course, how homes are built. So this is a shot before drywall or insulation is going in or drywall. And really, our category, we have a lot about ventilation and making sure that buildings are sealed very well, they're high performance, and they have proper infiltration rates. We're also talking about universal design. It's something that's in our program. So if you're familiar with our program, you used to see this in Category 1, our integrated design category. We've brought it back to sit in Category 7 with active design. So for folks that have mobility challenges, this is an example of somebody in a wheelchair, but mobility challenges really range a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's respiratory, sometimes it's a heart condition, sometimes somebody has mobility challenges when they're in a wheelchair. So I think universal design is a great way to make your projects really serve the broadest amount of people for the longest duration of their life. It's a really great aging in place type feature as well. So particularly interesting to me as my parents get up there and start to have some challenges getting around. So universal design is a really great thing to think through, especially if you're in a senior condition. And then just a little bit more about ventilation. So this is an exhaust-only system. This is more of a balanced system using an HRV. Green Communities does have ventilation requirements. We've taken them all. So we used to have the whole building ventilation and then a point source exhaust ventilation for kitchens and bath. And now we put it all into one category. So now all of that, what used to be 747576, is now 71. So within our program, so the requirements are largely the same, and making sure that new construction and substantial rehab projects need to meet those, and then for moderate rehab, there are optional points that are available to meet those. So, really a system like an HRV or an ERV, it's not required within the program, but of course, they do cost more money. I'll be the first to admit the balance system is a more expensive system, but does it perform better? Yeah, it does perform better, and I think we know how to build that whole adage. Build tight, ventilate right. I think if Ohio is an example, I think we're doing quite well with that. So that's really where we're staking our claim on that. And then a little bit about how homes are maintained. So choosing better products. So if you're healthy living environments, of course, you need to have fewer toxins in the environment. Some of that would be about cleaning products. But really, smoking is the big thing. So this table is from Smoke-Free Housing New England, another study from 2009. So this is what it would cost to do a unit turn or a unit flip when residents leave, and there's been smoking in the unit. Heavy smoking units, it's almost $3,500. I'd imagine that number could be potentially a lot higher. This is done in the Boston area, so I don't think it's a pretty normal environment for a percentage of smoking. So all that to say, a lot of projects in Ohio have gone smoke-free. So if you have the ability to, a new construction project or something like that, you can earn a ton of optional points within our program by going smoke-free. Some key component to that, I think, is creating a space outdoors where residents who do smoke can have a place where they can go, and it's nice and welcoming, and it's a good space, actually. You want to make sure that it's not a place where people don't want to use. I was working on a project in Philadelphia, and they had a rehab project, and they wanted to go smoke-free, but there were a lot of residents that smoked in the building. So as they were doing the renovation, they set up the little smoker stand outside the door, and then every 2 or 3 months they would move the smoke stand a little further away from the door. And then eventually, by the end of the rehabilitation, it was on the other side of the parking lot, and they built like a really swanky gazebo out there, and then no one said anything. They were just totally happy that they got this really neat little gazebo, and they enjoyed the little walk out to it, and it was really easy. So, that's a sort of phased approach, but they're taking the long view, and I think they got residents to a place where they could make the building go smoke-free and with relatively easy time of it. So the big highlights in Category 7, of course, ventilation. We didn't touch on integrated pest management, but making sure all holes in big areas are sealed properly. Our universal design criterion, which is still in our program. Our new active design criterion, which I spoke about at length. And then the importance of smoke-free, especially for new construction projects. But if you have a rehab project in which it is a possibility, it's something that you should really proactively look at. Both in terms of achieving green community certification, but really just improving indoor air quality in general. It's really impossible to seal units entirely. Operations, maintenance, and resident engagement. So I'm running a little long, but I'm going to briskly get through this so we can have more Q&A time. Operations, maintenance, resident engagement. As I said, the best systems are going to fail if people don't know how to run the building. They don't know what's beeping. They don't know what the light means. So our program has some fail-safes to make sure that your project will be operated properly. People will know what systems are in there. They will understand how they work. They will understand who to call when things fail. So in our 2015 criteria manual, you'll probably see this category has ballooned in size. We have a lot of really great resources and recommendations in there as to what to do during construction to make sure you have the information to run the building properly. How is your maintenance staff going to communicate with the installers to understand that how the system was installed, how it's expected to run, and what are the 5 most common errors that come up with the system, those types of things. The emergency management manual, what happens when something goes wrong, this is the information, this is what's most likely to happen, this is what we'll do, this is how we maintain a paper and a digital record of that, how do we track that. So this gets back to some of our resiliency planning. Resident manual, critical. Residents need to understand why you designed the building this way, why all the good work that you did and you've done, and both in the funding of it or the designing of it or the construction or the rating of it, how all this applies to them. And I think there's a really important story to tell them about why it was placed here, what sort of amenities are in this area, how do they connect to those amenities, that infrastructure, but also why is the building a high-performance building? What does the water conservation features mean to them? What can they expect from their bills? So that sort of information to get to residents. Resident and property manager orientation. It's critical to make sure that people get an orientation to the building and actually understand from a person how it runs. They don't just sort of get the keys to the car or the house in this case and then just sort of operate it. It takes a little training and a little education. And then project data collection and monitoring. So making sure that you proactively understand how the building is performing and tracking data across time. So this could be using something like Energy Star, the EPA Portfolio Manager, or WeGoWise, or Energy Scorecards. One of these softwares to be able to track data and actually be able to use building performance as the diagnostic tool that it really could be. So you can say, Unit 719 seems to be spiking. Is there something happening? The water is going crazy in this unit or this section of the building, to be able to actually proactively manage the building. So that was a quick run through the 8 criteria categories. I'm going to go into our certification process now, and I think many of you are familiar with that, but I do want to spend a moment for those that are less familiar with it. Do we have any questions on the 8 categories or how they work? I'm sure you have a ton of questions and will once you get into more detail. This is maybe the first blush some of you have had at taking a look at this. The handout in the back, I will say, is an overview of the 2015 criteria, so it gets into a little bit of what's changed between the 2011 and the 2015, but it doesn't get into probably as much detail. Online, we do have a comparison matrix, so it takes the 2011 checklist and takes the 2015 checklists and put them next to each other, so you can see where things lie. So if you go to our website, you can find that. But I explained it all perfectly? This literally would be the first time.
Fantastic.
Oh, thanks. All right. Well, I will be around the rest of the afternoon. So as you let this percolate and there are more questions, I'll be really happy to answer them later on. Certainly don't want to miss anything. So how many of you have certified a project with green communities? Okay, great. I would say 2/3 to 3/4. Great. Well, thank you for being one of the 12,000 units that we've got in our pipeline at some stage. We've got a slew of projects in Ohio. We're really happy to be working with Ohio. We can get you a finer point number. I'm sure the folks at OHFA would like a very precise number, so we can get you that, I promise. But the certification process for us is 2 steps. For those of you who have not done it, we have a pre-construction step and a post-construction step, or pre-build and post-build. And at the pre-build step, we're really looking to collect as much information as we can, knowing that the project hasn't been funded yet or is just getting funded, and really everything may not be perfectly settled on. So our entire certification process is online. There's an online portal which you can reach through our website. And you go there and you put in a bunch of building level information, project level information, who's building it, who's on the project team, when was it constructed, how was it built, what are the systems that are in the building. And then you go through the checklist and you actually say, we will meet this criterion this way or this criterion that way. And then you outline who's going to be responsible for that. So if later on in the process we want to check up on this, who do we call? Do we call the electrical engineer? Do we call the architect? Do we call the contractor? And then where in your documentation is this? So when people ask us technical questions, we'll actually say, well, you said this would be explained on this sheet. Could you send us the sheet so we can take a look at it and verify it? That's a really great check for us, and we've had really good success with that. We also have a series of other supplemental documents which we collect to verify some of our other programmatic requirements. So we were speaking about energy modeling earlier. So this would be where you would get some preliminary HERS ratings, preliminary Energy Star certificates to make sure that the building is designed, it's intended to if everything goes according to plan, it will meet a performance of this. So that is required at our pre-construction step. At post-build, we do a similar thing, except all of that information is embedded in the system itself. So when you go in, we're really looking for you to verify and validate and update any information that's changed. So you go through and say, well, you know, Gary's not on the team anymore. We've got Luke. You know, we decided to not do this window. We installed this window instead. Or, you know, we had 3 elevators. Now we have 2. Whatever the sort of changes were, you recalibrate your application then. And then you go through the criterion itself, and then you make edits and adjustments there too. So, you know, we expected to go with the super high performance fixtures. We ended up not doing those. Those got costed out. We changed our plans. Whatever the sort of situation is. So when you're coming through for certification, our suggestion is always to plan a few more optional points than you need necessarily, just in case something changes. This is not something that happens terribly often, but it's really good to have a little bit of a buffer there, just, you know, in case things change. And then at post-build, we do collect some additional information as well. So project photos and a photo release. This is so partially so we can highlight the great work that you've done, but also by requesting it, we find that people take more photos during construction. It becomes part of someone's job, which is great because you need the photos to talk about the project as well. And then we now have some supplemental document requirements for operations and maintenance and resident engagement manuals, which you can send over to us. And then making sure that you're signed up for one of these utility tracking systems like Energy Scorecard or EPA Portfolio Manager, something like that. So previously we collected the waivers for those. Now we do not need the collection information for that. You can just sync us to that system. So we have accounts for all of the systems that we know of at this point. So you can just link us to your account, and that's great. Don't need to collect all that extra paperwork for you all. So it's a little bit more straightforward. We review all certifications within 30 days. I wish we could do it quicker, and many times we can if push comes to shove, but we review certifications as they come in. So when a project comes in, it gets into our queue, and we review it within the order that it's come in. So 30 days, which is why we emphasize complete documentation, you know, go through the documents, call us if you have questions about if something's going to be up to snuff or not. We really don't want to send something back to you all and work through it if we don't have to. We know that it cogs up the wheel and slows up the process. However, we are very cognizant that it's sometimes really hard to do this. So, you know, we work pretty closely with project teams across the country. I don't recognize everyone's face, but I'm sure I've received emails from at least half of you, and I hope I emailed very quickly in return. So we really try to get information back to you as quickly as we can to not slow up the process for you. So that's a bit of our certification process at a high level. I ran a little long in terms of talk, but we do have a few minutes for questions. So I'd like to open it up for questions to see if anybody has any, either on the green communities categories or the certification process. We do have, so this is what we covered. I did a brief introduction about green communities and why we do what we do. I did an overview of the 2015 criteria. I'll be the first to admit it was quite brisk. So technical questions, we can go in depth a little bit later, or I have cards, we can email about it. And then talked a little bit about certification. But I'm happy to take questions now for everyone if we have any.
Ray, I want to jump in with 2 points. I'm in Cleveland and part of the local relationship for green communities. So if Ray or the green communities mailbox isn't responsive, feel free to reach out to me as well. And then we sometimes, so just a reminder, green communities step 2 approval is required for the 8609 process. So some of you are involved in different parts of the project, but sometimes project teams can be caught off guard with a press at the end to get all of their paperwork in order and get the project wrapped up and get in for the dollars. But if green communities, that step has not been dealt with, there will be a slowdown at the end. And I and the green communities team keep in touch with the OHFA staff as needed, and sometimes we're really hustling on particular projects. So it's just a point of planning in advance and certainly coordination, but it's always great not to get into an issue there.
Great. Got a couple questions, it looks like. Thought we had one over here, but maybe not. We just have one back up. I'll just repeat it. Great question. So his question was about the certification portal and being able to connect multiple team members to a project. We do have a way. You can shoot the certification mailbox an email and just say, these are the folks that need to be added to this team, and we can do it back of house to update it. We can do it for you now. So if you have projects that are already in the hopper, we're happy to do it for you. We are making improvements to the 2015 to the certification portal. So we're increasing the print functionality. We're improving the save functionality. We now have an auto save in place, so project teams won't lose information, and a series of triggers, more mandatory items to make sure that people don't get caught off guard later in the process. So more improvements have gone into the criteria portal. That's sort of phase 2. After we developed the criteria manual, we all had to take a breath and do some of the trainings on it. But we're doing it right now, and it'll all be up to date. But adding more people to a project, we'll do it today. Send the email to certification. Myself or Amy will take care of it for you. Yep. Great question. Question in the back?
Sure. Actually, Ray.
Sure. So the question was just at the 8609 point at this post-build construction, are there any persistent problems that people face either in terms of documentation or the hustle to get it done? I guess I wouldn't say that anything's consistent. I would say sometimes a project team has not done the post-construction performance work, so they don't have the Energy Star certificates or they don't have the HERS rating, and then it's sort of a rush to get the folks out there to do it. But honestly, I don't think that that's as much of a problem in Ohio as it is in other places. I think it's just sort of a documentation kind of thing and showing your homework. We require a good bit of information at pre-build planning, which people have probably noticed. I think the intention of that is that at post-build, we know that people are getting off the project. Your designer's moving on to he's doing punch lists, about to leave. Like, yeah, people, run for the hills to get onto their next work. So we know that there's a lot fewer folks involved. So we try to front load a lot of the documentation as best we can. So we have a little bit less at post-build. I don't think that there's a consistent thing in Ohio, though, around documentation. A performance test, maybe. But
And the other piece is some project teams just forget that they have to come in for this step 2 piece, and that is remembered, and it's just a press at that point.
Yeah. We do send out reminders from the mailbox, so every 60 days as your construction closing date or construction completion date approaches, we try to be proactive with email reminders, but sometimes people's email addresses change, so. I saw a couple questions in the middle, and they're walking around with the microphone right now.
I just wonder if you guys had a template for your emergency management manual.
We don't yet. We do have, in the full criteria manual, we do have a bunch of information as to what should be included in that. We do have, our New York City office has developed a emergency management disaster toolkit, which I think is a lot more templatey, and you could pull out the relevant information. I don't think the emergency management manual is as, the requirement is as thorough or document heavy as the resident engagement and the operation and maintenance manual, which have been beefed up a lot. So we're building one out right now. The New York City office has one, and we can send you that information, or you can find it on Enterprise's website if you look for emergency management. You can track that. other question in the middle?
I just had a question about some of the criteria have gotten almost easier to a degree to achieve. Is there going to be any consideration for projects that are already in 2011, the 2015, as, you know, even on retroactive?
Sure. So the question is, for criterion that have become easier, is there any way for projects that are in the current pipeline to use the easier approach? We have seen this in a few cases. So the big example is lighting. I don't know if lighting is the one that you were thinking of, but lighting is the one that's come to our attention the most. So we had previously in the 2011 criteria had a certain pin-based lighting fixture requirement, which was a bit challenging for some groups. So now we just have a high efficiency light bulb requirement with a lumens per watt. So some groups have gone to that approach as opposed to it. What we would do in that case is we would track all of this through our waiver process. So you would need to come in and seek a waiver and say that you were using the 2015 approach. And if it was for the same criterion and it was applicable, we would consider it. But we would track it through the waivers because it is a deviation from the 2011 criteria. And so that for us, that helps us know, 90% of projects met this letter of the law and then 10% met it through a waiver. So that's helpful for us to understand when we build out the 2018 or 2019 criteria. Any more questions at this time? There will be time for Q&A at the end with myself and the others that are going to be speaking in a moment. So I don't want to, this isn't your only, this is your first chance. Well, while I have the mic alone, I'll just say thank you, OHFA, for inviting us here. We're really thrilled to be doing work here. We're really thrilled to work with folks in Ohio, and really happy to be working with you all on your certification projects. And I think Ohio is one of the greenest affordable housing markets in the country, we can say confidently, because of the policies and the hard work that's been in place by OHFA and then the development community here. So on behalf of myself, Ray from the D.C. office, but lives in Baltimore, so don't blame me for D.C. gridlock things. But thank you for your attention today. I'll toss it back. Thanks.
All right, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but I'd like to take a 5 to 10 minute break. So if you'd like to use the restroom, grab something to drink. We're going to reconvene at 2:15, and then we'll continue on with our agenda. For those who are participating by webcast, feel free to send your questions or comments to the 2016 QAP mailbox. We'll be addressing those at the Q&A at the end. So that's for folks who are on the webcast. Particular standard and a little bit about NGBS and home innovation in general.
So as Maya mentioned at the beginning, the NGBS is a new addition to the Ohio QAP, and we're really grateful to have that option available. We're really looking for choice in the marketplace, and we're glad that you all now have an option to choose which program works best for your individual projects. My name is Cindy Wasser, and I'm the manager of Green Building Programs at Home Innovation Research Labs, and I'm going to give kind of a very broad level overview of the National Green Building Standard and the certification requirements and process. We're going to talk a little bit about costs and which other jurisdictions and QAPs recognize the NGBS. And then I'll turn it over to Chris Schwarzkopf. Chris is an accredited NGBS verifier, so he's actually one of the professionals that works one-on-one with builders and developers to get projects certified, and he's going to share some examples. And my hope was that of the examples, maybe at least one is reminiscent of something that you're working on or have worked on, so you can really see how your projects line up with the certification requirements. So after my remarks, I'm going to pass this around so you can thumb through it during Chris's talk. And then that way, if you have any specific questions about any of the practices, we can talk about it during the QA portion of the program. But the National Green Building Standard is the first and only residential green rating system that has been ANSI approved. So it's approval by the American National Institute of Standards. And what that means is that the standard was developed with a really open consensus process with diverse stakeholders. So the process to develop the National Green Building Standard took about a year and a half, 2 years, and involved representatives from federal agencies like DOE, Department of Housing, as well as local building officials, product manufacturers, manufacturers associations, verifiers, raters, builders, land developers, architects. And also a key component of ANSI approval is that the standard has to be updated on a regular basis to integrate new best practices and increase the performance requirements. So the first iteration of the NGBS was released in 2009. The current version, which we call the 2012 version, was released in 2013. And the 2015 version is currently in process and will be released in the first quarter of 2016. But just like other green building rating systems that you're familiar with, the NGBS provides a assessment of a project's environmental impact. There are 4 certification levels: bronze, silver, gold, and emerald. Emerald being the highest. And I'm sorry, I jumped right in. How many of you have some familiarity with the NGBS already? Okay, great. So people sometimes ask how the NGBS stacks up to enterprise or LEED, and I think a point-by-point comparison isn't always effective because I think there are some broad strokes differences in how the standards are organized. First, the NGBS is just for residential projects. It covers all residential, single-family, multifamily, land development, and remodeling. And all the practices, because they were designed just for residential construction, they're really cost-effective to implement. They weren't commercial practices that were then adapted to fit a wide range of residential construction types. It's also written in code language, not so that the standard will be adopted as code, but so that anyone who picks it up really understands what the practices require without a lot of additional research or consultation. Energy performance is set as a % above code, and then there are additional points beyond that for higher performance. There are a few mandatory provisions, but largely the NGBS is expansive and point-based. So there's 1,100 practices to choose from. But something that is different is that in addition to all that flexibility and options for the project, it's also set up to be very, very rigorous. So to have a project certified, it has to meet point minimums in each and every category. And to move up in certification level, you have to hit those point thresholds in every category. So it provides a really balanced environmental performance. There's also an equal emphasis on design and construction. So many of the practices that require a plan to be reviewed, on-site verification is also required to ensure that the plan has been executed as written out. So a little bit about my organization. Home Innovation Research Labs is a 50-year-old company that has always been solely focused on the home building industry. We originated as a small products test lab and then have evolved to provide a whole range of services, including product testing, product certification, market research, consulting. So we work with both private clients and federal agencies and other partners to bring innovation to the market and reduce barriers of entry for new product designs and best practices. Since 2009, we've been providing certification services to the National Green Building Standard, and so what we bring to that program is the way we have operated as an accredited third party. We bring that same focus and discipline to the green building certification. And when we were setting up the NGBS Green program, we really wanted to reduce barriers to entry for green certification. So we wanted to address both the real problems and the perceived barriers. So we've kept our certification fees very affordable. so that any project, whether it's an affordable project or a market rate or a more high-end project, can seek certification. We also know that time is money, so we've worked really hard to provide timely responses to technical assistance, interpretation questions. We try to respond within 1 business day. In the same way, we try and turn around final certification for projects within 1 business day of receiving the final verification report, provided that everything has been provided complete and accurately by the verifier and payment has been submitted previously. We also do not charge for either technical assistance or interpretation. And we just really have tried to really focus on delivering superior customer service because we want this to be really, not a painful process. We want this to be enjoyable and not take up a lot of your time waiting on administrative processes. Throughout my presentation, I have a few examples to show the diversity of projects that can be certified by the NGBS. I think that there is still a little bit of a misperception in the marketplace that the majority of homes seeking certification are regular single-family homes, when the large majority are actually multifamily projects. So the photos in the presentation just show that diversity. This is one of our largest multifamily communities that has been certified to date, and currently the only one in the borough of Manhattan. It's an equity residential property. So these are the chapters of the National Green Building Standard. So we've already walked through the enterprise criteria, and I think a lot of these chapters line up with how enterprises organize their rating system. I'll just go through them very briefly. We're not going to go into as much detail. So the lot design chapter, you're going to be considering the sensitive environmental aspects of the lot. So any brown fields, infill, sloped wildlife habitat, waterways, etc. You're also going to consider the environmental impact of your construction practices and erosion control, sedimentation, etc. If you're building in a denser area, you can get points for that, as well as if you're building near walkways, bike paths, etc. Energy efficiency, there's 3 pathways to achieve energy efficiency requirements. If you're doing Energy Star certification already and you aren't seeking a level beyond bronze, you can do the alternative bronze path, just submitting the Energy Star information, but the project can't receive anything beyond bronze. There's also the prescriptive and the performance paths. The performance path is set at 15% above IECC 2009 or 2012 IECC compliance. So you'd have to submit energy testing and modeling that shows that percent above. Water efficiency chapter, there's a lot of practices related to hot water piping, as well as water efficient fixtures, faucets, and appliances. Resource efficiency, this is about reducing the amount of material that's going into the project and making sure that sustainable products are sourced. And also there's points available for building smaller houses and building smaller units. Indoor environmental quality, this is practices related to emissions, radon, sustainable products, et cetera. There's a lot of stuff in there that you can pick and choose from. And then operations and maintenance. Any home that's being certified has to have a homeowner's manual or an operations manual, and training be provided to the homeowner or the property manager. And then there's a time delay. And then we always flip it around, and we provide a lot of marketing to our clients to help them market the advantage of the green benefits to the residents. So we always flip it around and talk about the health, comfort, durability, and efficiency of NGBS green certified homes. So I mentioned before about the rigor of the NGBS, and this explains it a little bit better. So you'll see up and down, there are point thresholds in each of the chapters. So to move from bronze to silver to gold to emerald, you have to hit those point thresholds in each and every chapter. And so if the project achieves silver or gold in every category except energy efficiency, where it only achieves bronze, the project can only be bronze certified. So whichever category is the lowest is the least common, it brings it down. But there's also flexibility built in where you see in line 7, additional points from any category. And so this provides some flexibility because you have to achieve that additional point threshold in addition to the point thresholds. So we see in the Northeast where energy is really costly, a lot of people take those additional points from the energy efficiency section. But in the Southwest, folks might take those additional points from the water efficiency section because water is a bigger premium in those areas. Does anyone have any question about the points before I move on? Did I explain this properly? Yeah, question in the back? Nope. So in the back I have the infographic, and on the back of the infographic there's a link to download the scoring spreadsheet. So this is a Excel-based scoring spreadsheet where you can go through, score your project, and then it's the same workbook that's provided to your verifier when he or she comes on site to do the inspection. And so that has all the criteria in one place. To show the performance requirements in a different way, I'm showing energy efficiency requirements of the NGBS and LEED. So as I said before, to go up in certification level, you have to have increasing performance in all the categories. And so for energy efficiency, this equates to a % above the energy code. So 15% above IECC 2009 is the baseline for any project to be certified. But to go up to silver, it's a 30% requirement. For gold, 40, emerald, 50. And then when this is compared to other rating systems, you'll see that no other program has this increasing performance requirement. So LEED version 3, they only have a 15% above Energy Star 2.0 as the requirement. And even projects that are certified at platinum or gold, they might have better performance beyond that because they want those points, but it's not required. I said before, the NGBS applies to single-family homes of all size, of all rural, suburban, urban. Also, multifamily buildings. So unlike some of the rating systems that have a pathway for low-rise or mid-rise or high-rise, all multifamily projects can follow the same certification pathway. We've also interpreted residential to also mean student housing, senior living, and military housing, and we've certified projects of those types as well. This is a project in upstate New York that was one of the first multifamily projects to be certified. In addition to the requirements for buildings to seek certification, there's a standalone chapter on land developments. So the land development certification is separate from the buildings. Although if there are buildings within the community that will be certified, they can earn the community points toward the land development certification. So if you're familiar with LEED ND or Enterprise Green Communities community certification, is that what you call it? Yep. It is somewhat similar, except the NGBS is more, it's less of a design standard. So it's really designed to be applied to any density threshold, whether it's a rural community or suburban or more urban. And there's equal emphasis on site selection, site design, and site development. There are 2 options for certification. You can do one or the other or both. So you can get a letter of approval of your plans. So it's before construction even gets started on the land, sending in your documents and sitting with the verifier, seeing how the project could seek certification. Oftentimes that letter of approval is really important for the permitting process and local jurisdiction. In addition to that, or separate, the project can seek full certification. So after the development activity is finished on the land, having someone come out and inspect and make sure that the green practices that they had sought were implemented properly. This is our current certification fee schedule for land development, but a caveat is we are currently reassessing our land development certification fees. However, if a project gets registered in the near term, they're going to be grandfathered in at these rates. So for land developments, we've certified a variety of communities to date, some 5 or 7 lot small subdivisions. We've also certified or have in process some much larger communities. So this is the Daybreak community in Salt Lake City. It's a 4,000 acre community that's going to have 20,000 residential units, a mix of multifamily, single family, mixed use, commercial. So this community actually has, they are fairly dense, and they have light rail in the community, but their density threshold wasn't high enough to achieve LEED ND, so they're seeking NGBS certification. So I know that OHFA only recognizes green building certifications. I just thought it might be worthwhile to mention that the land development certification is an option if you all have some control over the land activities of your projects. For remodels, there are 2 pathways. The first is a certification of the whole building or the whole home. This is a standalone chapter. There are a few mandatory practices, but it's largely based on energy and water reductions and achievement of a few additional green practices. So the first step for renovation is to measure and create a baseline of both energy and water use of the property. And then you're going to work with your project team and decide how you're going to make improvements of the water and energy use and document that. And then also implement a few additional green practices. And you're going to see this in more detail when Chris shares his case studies, because you're going to see actually how they went about and achieved those improvements. So for a project to be certified, they have to achieve at least a 15% reduction in energy, 20% reduction in water, and 88 other points from those other sections. There's a lot of flexibility, so if it's a historical property, you can't change out the windows or certain design elements, you don't have to, as long as you make up that energy improvement in other ways, changing out the HVAC system or providing higher insulation, et cetera. So for the energy analysis, you need both a before and after inspection to create the model and do the testing. For the analysis, these are the items that are considered: heating, cooling, water heating, lighting, appliances and plug load, common areas. Then the end goal is to create a % reduction. Usage before minus usage after divided by usage before. And it's based on a per square footage basis. For water, you're going to do a similar process, creating a before and after baseline. If it's an adaptive reuse and you don't have a history of how people use the living space before and what their utility bills were, you can make you can use these as guidelines. So estimate the number of flushes per toilet or faucet use, dishwasher use of the unit, and then calculate a % reduction. Something to note here is that this requires both an indoor and outdoor water use analysis. So if you don't know the outdoor water use, you have to make some assumptions about how people are going to use, if there's a hose bib, how that's going to be used to water cars, fill kids' pools, maintain the property, water the landscaping, etc. So there's a lot of flexibility, and when the renovation pathway was being created in the last update of the NGBS, people really thought that the moderate rehab would be the place where everyone was going. But we've seen that a lot of people are using adaptive reuse projects to meet the certification requirements. So this is a old bank building in Minneapolis by Village Green that sought certification. They turn the bank building into luxury apartments. Really great use of the space. There's also a pathway for small projects to be certified. So what a small project is, it's a kitchen, bathroom, basement, or small addition. And this is it's much more of a prescriptive certification. So it's any applicable practice is mandatory. So there aren't certification tiers. It's either certified or not. And we haven't had a lot of activity or interest in the small projects, and most typically the small projects that are being certified are, a basement addition or upgraded kitchen of a single-family home. But I'm mentioning this because if you're a property manager and you're doing kind of light rehab throughout a building and you are just upgrading the kitchens, for example, this might be a good way to go to provide some third-party value and quality assurance to your residents as they're coming in that at least part of their living unit is certified. So this is the process, and you have it in more detail on your infographic. The consensus committee that established the NGBS defined what a green home is. Home Innovation interprets and certifies to that standard, and we require 100% verification of every unit and every building for certification. And that provides a consistency in the marketplace. In more detail, the first step is to score a project. So I just answered a question in the back about where to find that scoring spreadsheet. If you go to homeinnovation.com/green scoring, you can download the Excel-based workbook and start getting to work on that. That scoring spreadsheet must be provided to the verifier that your team is going to be working with on the certification. And once you have a contract with a verifier, he or she is the one that's going to register the project with Home Innovation. There is no registration fee, and as soon as the project is registered, it appears on our website as in process to provide some marketing value to your team. And that is searchable in a consumer-facing way. So if it is a market rate project, people who are looking for a green apartment might stumble upon that website and check it out. There's links back to our client companies. The construction process gets started, and there are required inspections pre-drywall and then at final. And for multifamily, all units must be visually inspected. And then once certification is complete and the final verification report is turned into Home Innovation, we try to issue certification within 1 business day. The process for renovation is a little bit different, so I pulled that out. The registration process is just the same as new construction. For rough inspection, you're going to also follow the normal inspection notification process. So the verifier is going to notify Home Innovation when they're going out to inspect. And they're going to mark the scoring spreadsheet with the before conditions and establish that baseline at the rough inspection. And then at final, they're going to do this. That's when they establish the after conditions and then inspect for the green practices. So I said before, the registration process is mandatory but free. This essentially just gets to us what version of the standard the project is seeking, and it gets homes into our system quicker so we can better plan for what's coming down the pipeline. This is what the scoring spreadsheet looks like. It's Excel-based, and then you'll see at the bottom there is a tab for each of the chapters. That's what the project team will go through when they're scoring the project. So the criteria for each chapter is organized on one tab. And then there are other resources, including appendices and a scoring analysis. And there's also a standalone tab for the verification. So moving on, I wanted to spend some time on the verification requirements. So there's about a nationwide network of 350 to 400 verifiers. And there's a smaller group of verifiers who specialize in multifamily verification. And we've seen that some of those verifiers tend to work nationwide instead of having a regional geographic footprint. So it's not uncommon for a verifier who lives in North Carolina to also have projects in Alabama and Georgia and Texas, if those are where his clients are. As I said before, each and every home and apartment must be inspected pre-drywall and then at final. And both inspection reports must be submitted and reviewed by our team. The link to see the verifiers that work in this area and other service markets where you operate, there's a link on the back. It's homeinnovation.com/find-NGBS-verifier. And I encourage you to, if you have any questions about the verification requirements, feel free to ask me or Chris anytime throughout the presentations. Home Innovation qualifies, trains, tests, and accredits all the verifiers. They come to us with existing experience in both green building and residential construction. And then we require that they work through a number of online modules and take an online exam that tests their understanding of the NGBS requirements and the verification protocol. Once they're accredited, we provide ongoing training and support, and we ensure that they have sufficient insurance so they're not putting any of your teams at risk. And we do regular reviews of all inspections and routine site inspections, checking up on their work. Many verifiers also provide other services. So if you're already working with a HERS rater or an energy modeling team that you like, they might also be able to verify to the NGBS. Just have to check up on our website, making sure that they're listed there. Oftentimes I'm asked for a range of pricing of verifiers or the average amount of time that they're spending on site. It really depends. For multifamily projects especially, it's not uncommon for verifiers to also provide consulting services or trades training or energy modeling. So they're providing other services beyond just the NGBS verification. It also depends on how far they're traveling, et cetera. So I would encourage you, if you're ready to get started with a project, reach out to a number of different verifiers in your area and just get a sense for who you feel most comfortable working with and who will give you the best rate. So something to consider is compliance costs. So the smallest tier of pricing that you're going to have is the certification fees. Home Innovation has really kept our certification fees very affordable. So it's for a single family home, it's either $200 or $500, depending on whether or not the builder is a member of the National Association of Home Builders. And then for multifamily, it's the same, $200 or $500 plus $20 per unit. Very affordable, not a barrier. As I said before, the verification costs vary. So they are going to be higher than the certification fees, but it is variable. And then for practices and products, that's the largest bucket of costs to bring a building from code compliant to green. But I think because the NGBS was designed specifically for residential, a lot of practices are very cost effective. And I'm going to speak more to that in the next couple of slides. And then the bottom tier of costs, I've whited out to show that it's no longer present, or we've tried to eliminate it as much as possible. And that's the pain factor. We've tried to eliminate the heavy lift for technical assistance and interpretations and administrative wait time as much as possible. So it's really hard to speak to cost compliance for multifamily projects because they vary so much, garden style, mid-rise, high-rise. But we've found that it's really great when our clients share us numbers. And for this project, this was a market rate multifamily project that went from code compliant to silver level certification, so not even the lowest certification level for a 0.124% increased cost. Very reasonable. And first of all, we touch on
One way that we've worked to reduce the administrative burden is with our pre-approved products. So Home Innovation pre-approves products to meet particular practices of the NGBS, and they're all listed on our website. You can search by brand or product type or by the practice itself. And whenever a green certified product is used and it's marked on the website, or excuse me, on the scoring spreadsheet, the verifier doesn't have to do any additional documentation review to verify that practice. So you're saving time by not having to dig up that documentation, and you're saving the verifier time. He doesn't have to review it. You can just sign off on it, put it on the scoring spreadsheet as a green certified product. And we always encourage folks that if you have an architect, tell them to go to the website, download all the product specs for these pre-approved products, and just save them on a file on your desktop or hard drive, so you can pull them up when you're ready to seek an NGBS project. I don't know if any communities in this area have been considering or are ready to implement the IGCC, but I just wanted to mention it briefly because it has become the trend. A number of major cities have adopted or in the process of adopting the IGCC, International Green Construction Code. What's important to note here is that the NGBS is the only recognized alternative compliance path for multifamily projects to be compliant with the IGCC. And it can be a more cost-effective way to comply with the jurisdiction's IGCC requirements. So if you are in an area that is seeking IGCC adoption, that's something to be aware of and make sure that that option is included. There are numerous local, state, federal agencies that recognize NGBS in some way. And on your on the back of your infographic, I do have a link to available incentives, so you can take a look, see if there are any incentives in areas where you're building projects. And if you're building affordable in places other than Ohio, I wanted to mention that there are 20 states currently that recognize NGBS as part of their QIP. So the NGBS hasn't been around as long as Enterprise, so it hasn't gotten the same recognition, but we're working on it. We've seen that it's been a really good fit because it is really cost-effective and flexible. So we've seen a number of projects that are, either publicly financed or publicly owned affordable housing seek certification, or market rate with set-asides for affordable housing. And we've also seen some more typical low-income housing tax credit projects, supportive housing and shelters seek certification as well. And you're going to hear more about this project in a few minutes. So this is just, our certification activity to date. We recently surpassed our 50,000th certified home, and we have many more in process. And I think this is a real testament to the fact that we've worked with a standard that's really rigorous and flexible, and we've designed our program to be cost effective and work well with the types of projects that are coming in. If you have any questions that you think of after the program, please feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email. I'm happy to help. And I have some cards available if you want to take one after the program too. Any questions before we make the transition to Chris? No, it's all the same. Sorry, that's a really good question. I didn't speak to that very well. So if you're accredited as a verifier, you're accredited to certify any type of project, single family, multifamily, land development, renovation. We just highlight people with more multifamily experience as a separate call out on our website so that people can be better connected with folks that fit their project better. Great. Any other questions? Okay, great.
I get to my presentation. Awesome. So my name is Chris Schwarzkopf, as Cindy said, and I've been introduced. I'm a green verifier, a HERS rater, HERS trainer, and I'm working on my my lead green rater as well. I've got a couple projects in with Enterprise Green, I think 8 or 9. None of them certified yet, but we're working on that. My presentation is allocation with the NGBS. I'm going to do my best not to overlap what Cindy discussed earlier, but if you hear me say, as Cindy said earlier, it's just because. So you have 3 basic types of allocation projects. You have new construction, adaptive reuse, and substantial to moderate rehab. And the way NGBS works is it's kind of the one project or one certification to fit all. So you have single-family new construction, multifamily new construction, which are both scored to the same certification checklist. You have single-family rehab and multifamily rehab, which is scored to the same single-family rehab or multifamily rehab checklist, regardless of the size and height. So NGBS is the shape that fits all, if you will. New construction refers to the site preparation for and construction of entirely new structures and or significant extensions or existing structures, whether or not the site was previously developed. New construction works pretty simple. If you have an existing structure and you're adding onto it, the structure has to be 75% of the same size. Well, I'll get into that a little bit later. It's new construction. You guys all know what new construction is. A little case study. Again, I'm going to do my best not to overlap, but this is a project in Lake in the Hills, Illinois. It's called Lake in the Hills Villas, or Villas of Lake in the Hills. 64 units, 8 buildings, so roughly 8 buildings, or 8 units per building. New construction key facts. Must score enough points in each section to achieve desired level, as Cindy stated. Score bronze, silver, gold, or emerald. Certification level is determined by the chapter with the lowest certification type are achieved. So as you can see in the graphic, if you achieve gold or emerald in any of the sections, it doesn't matter if you're silver in energy efficiency or whatever else. Must meet all mandatory practices. Don't get scared by mandatory practices. It's pretty much code compliant issues anyway. I think the only one that isn't is the window sticker requiring the air infiltration and the fireplace. Who puts fireplaces anymore anyway? 3 energy efficiency paths, as Cindy discussed. Performance path. It's compared to the 2009 IECC, so that's not scary. You guys are all built to 2009 already and moving into 2012. Each % over 2009 is worth 2 energy efficiency points. If you aren't very good at math, there is a report created by RemRate that will show you how many points the project will get. Energy Star, again, is not required, but it will get you a free pass with a maximum certification level of bronze. And the prescriptive path, which is basically just gather enough points and practices in the energy efficiency section. Back to this project. This is a QAP project in Illinois. I was called in late, so the project was already designed and under construction when I was contacted. They thought that the maximum they could achieve was bronze. They designed to the prescriptive path, but they wanted performance testing for additional funding. As you can see, if you don't have a verifier, you're going to be the guy with his hands on his face if you're not used to the NGBS. It's an extensive checklist, but it's really not that scary. The rough inspection. Each unit is inspected. We verify applicable points. Grade 2 insulation is acceptable, but grade 1 will obviously get you more points. And why not go grade 1? Who goes grade 2 anymore? gather supporting documentation, and then you send the verification report, rough inspection points claimed only, along with the signature page and a front elevation shot. Rough inspection notes. As you can guess, we found more points of the project. Had this been a QAP project where it was based off of competitiveness, bronze in any of my 2 states or 3 states that I work with probably won't get funded. There's just too many other projects that are designed a lot better than this. We found several areas where the project could improve to ensure good blower door results, better air sealing. The project was cellulose, but there were still air sealing measures that we implemented. Final inspection. Project's built out. It's fully landscaped. We inspect each unit. We verified the remaining points and practices. We performed a sample blower door test. You have to inspect every unit, but you can sample set performance test. We gathered the remaining documentation, collect final signatures, sent a verification report, signature page, and front elevation photos of each unit, each building to Home Innovations. And they were awarded the certificate 3 days later. This was a typical new construction project. Nothing crazy green about it. Your standard procurement, your standard VOCs, good landscaping. The benefit of this project was it was very well insulated with extremely high efficient equipment. So at the final, guess what? It tested better than we thought, so it achieved more points, and in the end, it achieved a silver certification over bronze. Builder's happy, I'm happy, because I'm going to get the next project. Points and practices. I didn't think that was going to show up. Pretty much, I could go through the levels or each section if you guys want me to. It's pretty simple, like I said. It's the standard procurement, community amenities, all that fun stuff. Any questions on new construction and the procedures? All right, let's move on to adaptive reuse. Using an old existing building for a purpose other than which it is built for. Adaptive reuse key facts. Energy and water reduction is based off of percent improved. There's no HERS index, there's no Energy Star requirement, it's just what it is over what it's going to be. Bronze, 15% more efficient energy, 20% more efficient water, all the way to emerald, which is 45 energy and 50% water. There's no baseline audit in adaptive reuse. You just simply can't do it. It wouldn't be fair. So what Home Innovations has presented to us is we could use an as-is model if it were built based off of 1980 code minimum specs. 1980 code minimum specs compared to now, especially with efficiency and higher insulation systems, is actually you can achieve really high certification types. Additions are permitted provided that the increase is less than 75% of the original space. So back to the new construction. If you're building a huge addition onto this space, you have to go with the new construction. You can't go adaptive reuse. Score enough points in Chapter 11, as Cindy stated. Big points, high-scoring certification projects are relatively easy to achieve if you have the right team. Easily the most rewarding, but most of the time the most challenging. What we had to start with. A century-old church. Was this up on the board earlier? Okay. Okay. This one's my favorite. I got there, and it looked like that. There's just exterior walls, no roof. It's in a historic neighborhood. All the houses around it were done nicely, and this was just an eyesore. It's been abandoned for about 15 years, I think they said, and the roof had just recently collapsed. The project was seeking NGBS Gold, so we're looking for 35% energy improvement, 40% water reduction, and they had to score at least 181 points on the checklist. As you can see, there's the checklist. The thermal envelope. They had to design a structure built in reverse. Instead of building the structure, then putting your drainage plane, and then putting your exterior veneer, they had to do it from the inside out, as with most adaptive reuse projects have to. But this one didn't have a roof on it. So they used 2x6 wood frame walls with OSB sheathing, and they used Tyvek house wrap for a drainage plane, and they stood those walls up in between the exterior veneer and the new wall, and there was a gap between the two just in case there was moisture that got behind the brick. They had historic replica windows. Actually, if you go back to the first, you can see that large round window at the top. They actually kept that. Later, that wall actually fell, so they had to rebuild it, but another story. And the HVAC, these are smaller units. Those of you guys that have done REM rate before know that if you have high efficient gas, REM loves it. You can get really low HERS indexes, but problem with gas is you can only put, what, a 37K system in? That's way too big for these units. I think these needed, I want to say at peak, 8K. So we went with a mini split system. Tricky areas. Identify problems before it's too late. Any architects left in here? Okay, I'm going to pick on you guys for a minute because we get to the design stage, we're working through the project, and I asked, what about this detail? What are you guys going to do here? Oh, it's all in the details. It's all in the details, right? That's the common answer. Well, it wasn't in this case. Again, they were building from the inside out, so we run into walls like this. This is an interior wall. As you can see, wood frame against concrete. We've all seen this, right? HERS raters, we've all seen this before. What's the common detail here? To air seal that? There is no detail. They stuff rock wool in there for fire to stop. Doesn't air seal. So if we didn't catch this at the early stages, we probably would have had to use this many blower doors to test each unit. So in the event, they air sealed with foam to get a good seal between the attic space and the wall cavity. The other issues we ran into were this was built on an urban lot, and they're putting this huge roof on top of it, and there was really nowhere for the water to go. Of course, you can put gutters and downspouts, but you're going to just run it right into your neighbor's windows. So they had to decide on where they could direct the water and still comply with some of the mandatory practices with NGBS. There was a basement in this building, and they built it out. I think there were 8 units downstairs. They were constantly running into dehumidification issues. Throughout the build process, they had, I think, 8 or 9 regular store-bought dehumidifiers running constantly, just dumping water out. So just to make sure that everything worked for years to come, they installed an additional dehumidification system. Rough inspection. We follow the same steps as new construction. Use the energy report for your base usage, which if you looked at the new construction versus the adaptive reuse or versus the rehab, it's a little bit different in energy efficiency. So you'll start with your baseline audit. You'll put your numbers in at the beginning, and once that's sent in for rough, those are the numbers that you have to use. You can't go back and change them. Complete the water calculator. Same thing. Once you put these numbers in, they're locked in, and it doesn't matter. NGBS is not concerned with them using less water. I didn't say that right. They're not concerned with them using it less frequently. You have to use the same usage, just lower flow rates. And again, 1980 specs to now, it's pretty simple to get higher levels. Final inspection. Follow the same steps as the new construction process. You can sample blower door test, complete the energy table post-construction. So I wish my graphic was a little bit more clear, but as you can see, as you can't see, rough is compared to MBTUs per square foot. Final, same thing, and then there's a energy reduction percentage underneath that. And it tells you right there what level you've achieved in that section. So there's no question. Same thing with the water table. Again, it's not based off of using the faucet less, it's using less water each time you use the faucet. Along with the verification report, signature page, and photo of the home sent to Home Innovations, they'll also require a fuel summary. Again, it's baseline to now. And if it's 1980 specs, again, this project achieved, I think, 39% as a worst case over 1980 specs. So it was really good. Like I said, they were using 2x6 R19 walls, and if you build the path layer, it actually came out to over an R20 wall assembly compared, or including the brick, the drainage plan and everything, the high efficient mini split systems, pretty much just good air sealing practices as well. Another thing I don't think I spoke about yet is Home Innovations limits your infiltration rate to 7 air change, which again, that's pretty much code minimum everywhere. But these guys came in right around 5. The last project, or does anybody have any questions about substantial rehab? I mean, adaptive reuse. That's probably the most popular in what I see. Sure. Yes. Okay. So back to, oh, we're right there. You do not, there's not a requirement for mechanical ventilation. Obviously, it's a good idea. You're going to be exhausting stale air, bringing in fresh air. If you are under 7 air change, which you're mandatory for adaptive reuse or rehab, you have to install mechanical ventilation. You can use bath fans, continuous operating bath fans. You can use air cyclers. It doesn't state what you have to use as long as it meets ASHRAE 62.2. Anybody have any questions on ventilation? It's kind of a key topic at ResNet nowadays. Nope. Okay. Moderate rehab, this is the last one we're going to cover. I always like these because anybody in here do any weatherization? If any raters do weatherization work? You've done weatherization work, you know the fun finds you find with weatherization, right? All right, well, you'll see here in a little bit. Moderate to substantial rehab facts. Score the project the same way as the adaptive reuse project. Points for energy and water are scored the exact same way, so it's based off of improvement. The major difference is the baseline audit. The auditor has to go in and perform an energy audit or an energy analysis based off of what that house has. If there are already low flow rate faucets in there, it's going to be very difficult to get an improvement. But, as you know, sometimes you walk in and see something like this. Not always on a QAP project, but that was a weatherization house. You never really know what to expect with moderate to substantial rehabs. I've gone into some projects where the project looks almost new and get there and they're testing horribly, which is good for us, right? Because you're going to show improvement. And I've been in projects where this one's going to test terribly, and you get there and there's really nothing you can do. I mean, even nothing to air seal, nothing to do other than maybe improving on a little bit on the efficiency on the HVAC stuff. But that's pretty much it. I didn't want to go too far into it. Does anybody have any questions on the process or any of the projects or anything like that? Marcus Mariota, anyone? Got him on your fantasy team? I do. I'm sorry? I still didn't hear. I apologize. The process to become accredited, you go through Home Innovations. You submit to them that you'd like to become a verifier. They will approve you, if you will, send you some training material, and then there's an online test.
If you give me your card after the program, I'll send you our verifier accreditation handbook, which outlines all the details of becoming accredited.
This certification process is really my favorite. Like I said, I've worked with all three. This was the one that really makes the most sense. I've been doing this since 2008. I was number 5 top verifier, but I don't think I am anymore. Yeah, it's a really good program. Question?
Time of proposal, what we'll need is just a statement in the application. Typically, it's a written sort of
Affidavit that you're working
exactly,
with a verifier.
just indicating what certification and the level of certification that the project will be seeking. If awarded, of course, there'll be some additional have submitted at final application.
Question?
Bronze is the highest level, correct?
Lowest.
Lowest. Yeah, we'll clarify that in a future FAQ release. Make sure that folks are clear about what our expectations are.
It didn't say on the website. I looked. I was going to add that, but I couldn't find it. Any other questions about NGBS or verifications? Short and sweet. Wait. Thanks for listening.
Heard presentations at this point from both enterprise, green communities, as well as NGBS representatives. So I mentioned at the beginning of our training day that there would be some time at the end for questions and answers. So I'm opening the floor up at this time if there are some just general questions that we can answer. No, we're a little bit ahead of our agenda, so we're happy to spend a few minutes providing any
I have a
clarification.
question for Cindy. So is it only verifiers that can register projects, or so the project teams don't actually get into the system?
Only the verifiers can register the project. So before you're even starting to move forward with construction, I encourage you to have a formal contract with a verifier. You're going to need that interaction for any for registration as well as scheduling.
Sorry, the motivation was really just providing an additional pathway to achieve our green standard requirements, especially for moderate and substantial rehabs. That may be something that we consider as with future QAP updates, not necessarily something that's under consideration at this time.
Are you asking for Living Building Future or Living Building Challenge? We're free, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of certifications out there, and they're all, strengths and weaknesses and pros and cons, and certain ones emphasize certain things. I mean, it really depends on, you know, Passive House is going to net zero, and I know Passive House is getting really strong buy-in nationally, but it's super challenging. So, you know, they're going to be knocking on the door pretty soon, probably, but pretty tough one. But yeah, I mean, there are more. So if you want more friends, we can call our friends up.
I would say that there are a lot of programs out there, but the ones that are comprehensive and focused on all aspects of green building that are operating on a national basis are the three programs that are presented over the CIP. And I think they're all credible and rigorous and provide a holistic green requirement. I think it's up to your team to figure out what suits your project and your budget and what process you feel comfortable with. We're based in Maryland, so we're about halfway between DC and Annapolis. And as I said before, we're a material company. Our expertise is the home building industry, and we've been operating this program for about 6 years. And we became the leading program for green certification at residential units. Every single report that comes into our team is reviewed, and you might wonder how we can do that and still achieve certification within one system. We've really streamlined the process with the logic that's built into that Excel spreadsheet. We also have a really diverse team of people who are experts in HVAC and energy efficiency and water, and so we can rely on that expertise when we have questions or need support with reviewing their reports that are coming in. We also do desktop audits of our verifiers, so we'll ask a verifier to send additional documentation to the documents that they're reviewing in order to award points for an inspection. We'll say, hey, we want to see that, please send it in along with your report. We also grade all the verification reports that come in for completeness and accuracy, and we give our verifiers grades every 6 months. So this is going to get a grade from us in 2.5 weeks. Surprisingly, it's something that our verifiers actually wanted. They wanted to see how they ranked among their peers. We also do regular site visits. So we'll go out to a site where we know that inspection has been done in the last day or two, or is coming up on inspection in a day or two, and we'll do an inspection of the house and see how it compares with the verification program.
Yeah, and our program is set up similarly. We review all the documentation in-house, both pre-build and post-build, with myself and several other staff doing those reviews, reviewing everything from the intended methods at pre-build and post-build to the supplemental documents, the site plans, the context maps, the energy rating information. We have energy raters on staff as well, and you know, I'm from the design background, so architecture side of shop. So we review that as a team, and we do rely on the Energy Star and HERS ratings to do some of the performance testing for the project, which is why we have those requirements in there for the building performance stuff.
I would just say, perhaps if we're wrapping, but one other way to think about all of this work is to consider doing measurement of your buildings, certainly as you're bringing them online going forward. OHFA took a courageous step this year to include that as a possibility in the QIP. I think that got quick pushback from folks in the sector, but if we're not doing it now, we probably should be doing it and thinking about it. Certainly benchmarking existing portfolios and Portfolio Manager or Energy Star. WeGoWise is another system. But it's a feature in our 2015 criteria moving forward, but it's something that we should be moving towards throughout the sector.
Are there any final questions or comments for our presenters today? Well, if there aren't any further questions, I'd remind everyone that tomorrow from 9 to 5 in the same location, we'll be providing our 2016 Qualified Allocation Plan training, so I'm sure some of you will be joining us for that opportunity. The training will also be provided by webcast, so if you're not able to attend in person, you might think about logging on our website to participate by web. And then finally, I'd just like to offer if there are any questions that you'd like us to ensure that we address within tomorrow's training, whether it's related to our green standards or other topic areas within the allocation plan, feel free to stop up. We have some little sticky tabs, and we'll take your questions and make sure that we have some time in the agenda to address them tomorrow if they're really pressing. But thank you again for attending. Let's give our presenters a round of applause. And have a good evening.